Its judgment was as old as the stars. Commander Eva Rostova stood on the bridge of the survey vessel Stellograph, a place usually defined by the quiet hum of discovery. Now a stark tension coiled in the recycled air, thick enough to taste like ozone and fear. Before them, suspended in the black ink between orbits, lay the artifact. It was a spindle of impossibly white material, a fleck of bone against cosmic velvet, kilometers long and utterly silent. For 3 weeks, they had studied it from a safe distance, cataloging its passive emissions and the unsettling perfection of its geometry. They called it the Argent Spire, a name that felt too small for the weight of its presence. A low, persistent thrum resonated in their ship's hull, a ghost vibration that physics could not explain, but every crew member could feel in their teeth. The spire was human. That much was certain. Its quantum signature, however ancient and decayed, was an undeniable echo of Earth's lost children from the diaspora's dawn. But it was built on a scale that dwarfed modern endeavors, a relic from an age of titans. Its purpose remained a suffocating mystery, its sleeping arrays like the folded wings of a primordial god. The stakes were simple and absolute. Understand the single greatest discovery in galactic history before someone else did. That moment had just arrived. A cascade of proximity alerts chimed their polite tones, a stark contrast to the severity of the situation. A fleet had just torn through the system's edge. Report, Eva said, her voice a clipped, steady anchor in the sudden storm of activity. Her tactical officer, Kenji Tanaka, traced a finger across his console, his expression grim. 5 signatures, Commander. Hegemony of first claim markings. They're broadcasting wideband salvage codicils. They're not here to talk. The hegemony were not pirates. They were worse. They were cosmic repo men armed with lawyers and lance batteries who strip-mined history under the veneer of galactic law. Their arrival was a death sentence for this discovery. Lyceum, your assessment, Eva asked, addressing the ship's AI. The synthesized voice of Lyceum, calm as a frozen lake, emanated from the bridge emitters. Probability of hostile intent, 98.7%. Recommended course of action, immediate withdrawal to the jump gate. Our research mandate does not include armed conflict with a superior force. Every word was a needle of cold, hard logic. The 5 hegemony ships were cruisers bristling with weapon emplacements. The Stellograph was a science vessel, its primary defenses being its powerful sensors and a hopeful prayer. This was humanity's single most important inheritance. They could not simply run. Eva watched the approaching ships, their icons painted a bloody red on the main tactical display. They were moving in a practiced predatory formation, a wolf pack closing on a tethered lamb. Hold our position, Kenji. Anjali, get to engineering. I want a full diagnostic on the primary drive. Give me a clear picture of our absolute retreat window down to the second. She needed options even if they were all terrible. The young engineer nodded, her face pale but determined, and disappeared through the hatchway. The discovery was meant to be a lesson for all. A tinny voice crackled over the comms, skipping the formal hailing frequencies entirely. Survey vessel Stellograph. This is Archon Valerius of the Hegemony Cruiser. Indisputable writ. You are in violation of First Claim Statute 7.4. You have entered a designated salvage operation zone. Power down your non-essential systems and prepare to be boarded for inspection. Comply and your crew will be unharmed. The message was not a request. It was an invoice for their existence. Kenji's knuckles were white where he gripped his console. They're citing a law that only applies after a claim is publicly filed. They filed it the moment their drives spun down. It's piracy in a judge's wig. Eva ignored the hegemony's hail. Her eyes were fixed on the Argent Spire. The low hum in their bulkheads seemed to intensify a subtle shift in pitch that only she seemed to notice. It felt less like a machine coming to life and more like a sleeper stirring at an unwelcome noise. It was not a weapon waiting for a command. It was a witness. She knew with a certainty that defied all of Lyceum's logic that the spire was watching them. This was no longer about discovery. It was about worthiness. For a brief moment, a civilian technician on Deck 4 felt his heart skip. He was watching the live feed from the primary deep-range sensor, looking at the incomprehensible artifact. For a single frame, just one, the perfectly smooth white hull seemed to shimmer. It wasn't a trick of the light. It was as if a billion microscopic sigils, each a complex geometric pattern, had tasted the nearby ship's energies and then vanished again like raindrops on a hot stone. He blinked, told himself it was sensor ghosting, and went back to his work, the image already fading from his short-term memory. The stellograph was a vessel of learning, not of war. Archon Valerius. Eva began, her voice steady as she activated the external comms. This is Commander Rostova of the Coalition research vessel Stellograph. We are a non-combatant science mission operating under the Interstellar Heritage Act. This artifact is a cultural treasure of unparalleled significance. It is not salvage. A dry chuckle came back across the void. Commander, your Heritage Act is a lovely sentiment. It is also, in this sector, entirely unenforceable. The hegemony operates under the law of first claim, a tradition that predates your coalition by centuries. The artifact is dormant, unclaimed, and derelict. By law, it is ours. Power down your systems. The transmission ended. A timer appeared on the tactical display, counting down from 5 minutes. A demand, not a negotiation. It was time to make an impossible choice. Lyceum, Eva said softly, her gaze still locked on the spire. Run a comparative analysis. Cross-reference every known human diaspora symbol set with the low-level energy patterns we've been mapping on the artifact's hull. Commander, that data is purely theoretical, the AI responded. The patterns are likely residual energy from its ancient drive systems, a form of quantum scarring. They are not scars, Eva insisted, her voice gaining a sharp edge. They are writing. I've seen similar structures in pre-diaspora legal texts. They're seals, not of power, but of contract. Run the analysis. She was an academic first, a commander second. Her gut screamed that this was a test, and the hegemony was giving all the wrong answers. This ancient vessel did not answer to threats. It answered to precedent. The path to understanding was paved with impossible questions. Kenji moved to her side, his voice a low murmur. Commander, we have one tactical option. We can vent the primary coolant reserves and use the resulting plasma cloud as a sensor screen. It might buy us enough time to spin up the jump drive. It was a desperate textbook maneuver. It would also leave them blind and defenseless if it failed. It's a gamble that exposes our throat, Kenji Eva countered. If they call our bluff, we have nothing left. Respectfully, Commander, they are not bluffing, he replied, gesturing to the screen where the hegemony cruisers were now angling their bows, the faint glow of weapon ports becoming visible. This isn't an academic debate. It's a prelude to destruction. Eva felt the weight of her crew of the monumental discovery hanging in the balance. Running felt like a betrayal. Fighting was suicide. But perhaps there was a third option, an option that hinged on the nature of the spire itself. It was more than a ship. It was an idea given form, a statement of principles written in exotic matter. The low, resonant hum felt like a question, being asked over and over across millennia. Who are you? What do you stand for? A mirror does not judge. It only shows what is there. Lyceum, you have a result for me, Eva pressed, ignoring the countdown timer that now read 3 minutes. Affirmative, the AI stated. The energy patterns exhibit a 99.4% correlation with jurisprudential symbols from the first expansionary period. Specifically, they match the encoding format used for the Great Ledger, a theoretical legal codex that was never found. The AI's voice for the first time carried a fractional hint of something akin to surprise. The symbols are not static. They are counting. They appear to be recording all energy expenditure within this system. Eva's breath caught in her throat. A ledger. It wasn't a warship. It was an arbiter. A silent, patient accountant of cosmic deeds. The hegemony ships powering up their weapons were not just preparing to fire. They were making a detailed entry in a logbook older than their entire civilization. They were testifying against themselves. This relic did not demand strength. It demanded accountability. The countdown hit 2 minutes. Valerius's voice returned laced with impatience. Stellograph, your time is up. This is your final warning. On the tactical display, faint energy signatures began to coalesce around the hegemony weapon batteries. They were charging. Eva made her decision. It was a leap of faith, a scholar's gambit against a predator's blade. Kenji, stand down all tactical alerts. Power down our weapon systems. Anjali, I want you to divert all available power, everything but life support, to our main comms array. Commander Anjali's voice crackled from engineering, thick with confusion. Divert power to comms. That will leave our shields at minimum. Do it, Anjali, Eva commanded. Lyceum, I am not transmitting a surrender. I am transmitting our entire research log. Everything we have on the spire. Every scan. Every hypothesis. Every line of our cultural database. Unencrypted. Broadcast it on a wide open channel. Add the Coalition Charter and the full text of the Interstellar Heritage Act. A good teacher does not give the answer, but the means to find it. Kenji stared at her, his face a mask of disbelief. Commander, you're just giving them our work. You're showing them all our cards. We are not speaking to them. Eva said, her eyes gleaming with a fierce academic fire. She turned to the main view screen, to the silent white form of the spire. We are speaking to it. We are showing it who we are. We are presenting our case. It was a ritual, a plea, a demonstration of worthiness, not through defiance, but through offering. They would not raise a shield or power a weapon. They would offer knowledge. They would offer their intent naked and vulnerable to the silent judge. The timer on the screen hit 0. The hegemony ships did not fire. Instead, their energy signatures wavered. Valerius's voice, now laced with genuine confusion, came over the comms. Stellograph, what is this data burst? What are you doing? They had expected fear or flight or a futile fight. They had not expected this bizarre act of scholarly submission. We are submitting our findings for archival archon, Eva replied calmly, as is our duty under the Heritage Act. The universe does not reward force but balance. Aboard the indisputable writ, Archon Valerius watched the data stream pour into his systems. It was useless information. Historical texts, scientific sensor readings, philosophical treatises. It was the digital equivalent of a library being thrown at his warships. He sneered. A desperate, pathetic gesture. Their shields are down, his tactical officer reported. Weapons are cold. They're completely exposed. It's a trick, Valerius muttered, though he could not fathom the angle. A delay tactic. Ignore their transmission. Target their engines. A disabling shot. will take their ship intact. An order was given. The primary lance on the indisputable writ began its final charging sequence, a whine of power that echoed through the hegemony vessel. And then it happened. The low hum that had permeated the system for weeks abruptly stopped. For a single heart-stopping moment, there was a profound and total silence. Then a new energy signature flared to life from the argent spire. It was not a weapon charging. It was a light. A soft silver luminescence began to emanate from the entire length of the ancient vessel. The microscopic sigils Eva had guessed at were now visible, a flowing river of complex, interlocking symbols that pulsed with a gentle internal power. They were no longer just listening. They were awake. Every entry must be accounted for. The books must be balanced. A new voice spoke. It spoke not over the comms, but directly inside the minds of every single person in the system, human and AI alike. The voice was ancient, calm, and carried the weight of inexorable logic. It was not male or female. It was the voice of a contract being executed. Present your claim, it stated. State your precedent. On the bridge of the stellograph, the crew stood in stunned silence. The light from the spire bathed them in a soft, silvery glow, casting long shadows across the command deck. The air crackled with an energy that felt like static and ceremony. Lyceum's synthesized voice broke the spell, its tone now stripped of all its calculated calm. Commander, the artifact, its core systems are online. Power levels are immeasurable. I cannot quantify the scale. Eva Rostova let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Her gamble had paid off. They had not woken a weapon. They had woken a court. Archon Valerius recoiled in his command chair. The psychic voice, a violation he could not counter. His mind so accustomed to the hard logic of salvage law and superior firepower buckled against the sheer authority in that message. "What is this, some kind of psionic attack?" he snarled, trying to regain his composure. "Fire, fire." The lance now, the weapon officer stabbed at his console. Nothing happened. "Sir, firing command is locked out. All our weapon systems are offline." A wave of similar reports cascaded across the hegemony bridge. Their cruisers, moments before the apex predators of the void, were now disarmed. Not by a jammer, not by an attack, but by a simple, system-wide refusal. Their own ships would not obey the command to fire. A ledger remembers all debts, great and small. "A claim of salvage has been filed," the voice resonated once more, this time with a colder, more formal tone. "The subject is not derelict. The claim is invalid." The silver light from the spire intensified. A thin, precise beam of the same light lanced out not towards the stellograph, but towards the lead hegemony cruiser. It wasn't an attack. It touched the hull of the indisputable writ gently, and where it made contact, the ship's own energy systems were suddenly visible, glowing through the armor plating. The charging sequence of the main lance, the powered-up shields, the humming weapon batteries, all of it was rendered in perfect, excruciating detail, a spectral image of hostile intent. "A hostile act has been recorded," the voice declared. "The intent to cause harm is an energy expenditure. That energy is now entered as a debt." Valerius watched in horror as the spectral image of his ship's power systems began to dim. The energy was not being drained or stolen. It was being tallied. A strange holographic symbol, one of the same sigils now covering the spire, materialized in the void before his ship. It was a complex, interlocking glyph that seemed to represent a mathematical formula of immense complexity. Beside it, numbers began to scroll, counting upwards with impossible speed, cataloging the exact energy cost of his aggression. The mirror shows only the truth of the reflection. What is it doing to us? His second-in-command whispered, his face ashen. Valerius understood then with a dread that froze the blood in his veins. The spire wasn't fighting them. It wasn't defending itself. It was auditing them. It was taking the very energy they had marshaled for destruction and repurposing it not as a weapon, but as evidence. The power flowing to their lances was being transformed into a record of their crime. They were being defeated by galactic scale accounting. "It's turning our own power against us," he breathed. But it was worse than that. The spire wasn't reflecting the energy back. It was creating a consequence. It was enforcing a law so ancient and fundamental that it operated on the level of physics itself. The law of the ledger. "Your debt will be paid," the voice concluded. "The account will be balanced." Across the small hegemony fleet, systems began to fail. Not from damage, but from a sudden and inexplicable power deficit. Their engines sputtered. Their life support systems flickered. The energy they had so arrogantly brought to bear was now a weight, an anchor dragging them down. Their liability quantified and called due by an entity that had not moved an inch. On the bridge of the stellograph, Eva and her crew could only watch. The awe was quickly being replaced by a profound sense of reverence. They were witnessing the awakening of a power that did not need to kill to win. It was a power that simply and absolutely enforced the rules. Angeli's voice came over the comms from engineering. Her words hushed. "Commander, the spire, it is teaching us." Eva nodded, her eyes wide. The Argent Spire, the great discovery, was more than she could have ever imagined. It was not just a relic of the past. It was a living precedent. And its first act was not one of war, but of perfect, unassailable justice. The most profound lessons are written in silence. The hegemony fleet was adrift. Their primary systems were not damaged, but inert, the available power rerouted by their own ship computers to pay a debt enforced by an outside will. They were ghosts in the starlight, their weapons cold, their engines silent. Archon Valerius sat in his command chair, a king deposed in his own throne room, staring at the impossible equation that still hung in the void before his flagship. It was his sentence written in a language of pure mathematics. He had been measured and he had been found wanting. The silver light from the spire, now named in their minds as the Argent Ledger, softened. It had made its point, executed its function. The immediate threat was neutralized not through violence but through a flawless legal maneuver that used energy as its medium. The quiet hum returned to the hull of the stellograph, but it was different now. It was no longer a question. It was a presence. "Lyceum," Eva said, her voice barely a whisper. "What is the status of the hegemony fleet? Their power grids are stabilized at subsistence levels," the AI reported. "Life support is active. Communications are functional but restricted. Weapon and propulsion systems remain entirely offline. They are, for all practical purposes, helpless." Lyceum paused, then added, "Commander, the entity, the ledger, is hailing us. A lesson is not given, but offered for acceptance." Eva straightened her uniform jacket, a purely instinctual gesture of respect. "Open a channel." The voice returned, but this time it was directed only at them. It was still vast and ancient, but it lacked the cold, prosecutorial edge it had used with the hegemony. "Stewards of the Heritage Act," it began. "Your claim has been acknowledged. You offered knowledge in place of threat. You sought to understand, not to possess. Your precedent is accepted." Kenji looked at Eva. his earlier skepticism replaced by sheer awe. It was a test. The whole thing was a test of character. "It always is," Eva murmured. She cleared her throat and addressed the void. "We are honored. We are the crew of the Stellograph. Our mission is one of peaceful research and preservation. We did not know what you were." "I am a record," the voice explained. "I am the sum of agreements. I remember so that others do not have to raise arms. Humanity forged me in a time when law became a bulwark against the darkness. I do not command. I do not rule. I simply am." The sheer staggering implication of its words washed over the bridge. This was not a weapon of war from a forgotten age of conflict. It was the opposite. It was a peacemaking instrument of such profound power and subtlety that it had rendered an entire fleet inert, without firing a single shot. It was a monument to the idea that the law could be more powerful than any weapon. Humanity's greatest strength was never its weapons, but its words. Down in the ship's small hydroponics bay, a young botanist was tending to her rows of Terran wheat. She had felt the psychic resonance, the silent judgment, and the quiet resolution. Now looking out the viewport at the glowing ancient vessel, she felt not fear, but a sense of profound safety. The universe suddenly felt a little less chaotic, a little more just. She placed a hand on the viewport, the cold of space seeping through the composite, and whispered a quiet thank you to the silent guardian that had awoken. Angeli's voice cut through the quiet reverence on the bridge. "Commander, I'm getting a massive data transfer from the ledger. It's not just acknowledging us. It's giving us its index. Star charts, historical records, legal precedents from 1,000 forgotten colonies. It's the history of the first diaspora. It was a gift of unimaginable value, the key to humanity's lost centuries." Eva felt tears welling in her eyes. It was too much to comprehend. The spire, the Argent Ledger, had judged them worthy. It had chosen them as its first contact in an untold number of millennia. They had come seeking a piece of history and had been handed the entire library. But the voice was not finished. It had one more thing to say, a statement that would redefine their mission and their future. "The ledger is now open," it declared. "New entries must be made." The account of the hegemony of First Claim is unsettled. Their actions have incurred a debt. Their intent was theft. "Stewards, I ask for your judgment. How shall this debt be repaid?" The question hung in the air, heavier than any star. The Argent Ledger had neutralized the threat. It had passed its own sentence on their invalid claim. But now it was deferring to them. It was asking Eva Rostova, commander of a humble science vessel, to decide the fate of 5 warships and their thousands of crew. It was a test far greater than the first one. It was no longer enough to be peaceful. Now they had to be wise. To teach is to trust the student with the lesson. Eva stood frozen. This was a burden she had never anticipated. Kenji stepped forward, his face hard. "They're pirates, Commander. They came to destroy us and plunder a piece of our shared heritage. They should be stripped of their ships and stand trial before the coalition." His answer was simple. It was the law as they knew it. An eye for an eye, a ship for a ship. Lyceum offered its own cold calculus. A punitive judgment would send a clear message to other would-be salvage operators. Stripping the hegemony of their assets represents the most efficient deterrent against future incursions. The AI's logic was as always flawless and utterly without mercy. But Eva looked at the screen at the 5 helpless ships. She thought of the crews inside, men and women who were likely just following orders, cogs in a predatory machine. Stripping them of their vessels would leave thousands stranded, their lives ruined. It would be justice, perhaps, but it felt incomplete. It felt like vengeance, and the ancient entity before them did not seem like a thing of vengeance. It was a thing of balance. What would balance this account? This was the core of the test. The ledger was a tool of law. But law without wisdom, without a sense of restorative justice, was just another form of violence. No, Eva said, her voice finding a new strength, a new clarity. She was no longer just a scholar. She was the first person in 10,000 years to speak with a human saintship. She had a responsibility to that legacy. We will not take their ships. We will not ruin their crews. Kenji turned to her, incredulous. Commander, what are you saying? They're getting away with it. They are not getting away with anything, Eva countered, turning to face him. Their crime was an attempt to steal history, to erase knowledge for profit. So their repayment will not be in material goods. It will be in service, in labor. She turned her attention back to the silent, waiting ledger. The weight of a choice is the measure of the soul. Argent ledger, she began, her voice ringing with newfound authority. This is the judgment of the vessel Stellargraph. The hegemony of First Claim will repay their debt. Their fleet will be placed under our command. Their mission is no longer salvage. It is restoration. A hush fell over the bridge. Angeli, listening from engineering, held her breath. They brought tools to dismantle. Eva continued, her words flowing with a conviction that surprised even herself. They will use those same tools to preserve. There are a dozen other unregistered, decaying human artifacts in this sector. We have the list from your own archives. The hegemony will survey every single one of them. They will stabilize their orbits. They will catalog their contents under the supervision of the Coalition Heritage Project. They will use their ships and their crews to protect our shared history, not erase it. Their sentence is to do our work. They will become archaeologists. A mirror can be used to see oneself or to guide the light. She paused, taking a deep breath. Their debt is paid when the work is done, when they have given back more to history than they attempted to take. That is our judgment. There was a long, profound silence from the ancient vessel. The silver light on its hull seemed to pulse, to consider. The crew of the Stellargraph waited, their own futures hanging on its response. They had offered a judgment, not of punishment, but of purpose. A judgment designed to teach, not to break. Then the voice came one last time, a soft, resonant confirmation that echoed in their minds and in their hearts. A wise precedent. The judgment is recorded. The terms are set. It is entered. A single brilliant beam of silver light shot from the ledger and split into 5 smaller beams, striking each of the hegemony ships. On the bridge of the indisputable writ. Archon. Valerius watched in disbelief as his navigation console lit up. It was displaying a new set of flight plans, a list of coordinates for ancient derelict sites. His own ship's AI spoke in its flat, synthesized voice, new primary directive received and locked. Mission Archaeological Survey and Preservation. Course laid in for Artifact Site 734. Propulsion systems will be restored upon compliance. He was no longer a salvager. He was a field historian on a multi-year unpaid assignment. The Argent Ledger taught by numbers and remembered by ledgers. It never ever taught by collars. Eva watched as the 5 hegemony ships, one by one, slowly powered up their engines. They turned not towards the jump gate, but towards the first set of coordinates on their new long list of chores. They moved with a sluggish, sullen reluctance, but they moved. The judgment was being executed. The account was being balanced not with forfeiture, but with contribution. It was a solution of stunning elegance. The greatest power is not the ability to destroy, but the wisdom to repair. With the hegemony fleet beginning its long penance, the Argent Ledger turned its attention back to the stellograph. The data stream it had opened intensified, pouring terabytes of priceless historical and technological information into their computers. It was not just an archive. It was a blueprint. It contained the secrets of its own construction, the principles of its impossibly advanced systems, the legal and ethical philosophy that underpinned its existence. It was offering them more than just its history. It was offering them its legacy. Commander Lyceum said, its voice filled with something that sounded like reverence. The data includes schematics for a stewardship interface. It appears to be a way for a partner vessel to directly, though in a limited fashion, interact with the ledger's core functions. It's an invitation. An invitation to become something more. The stellograph was a science vessel, but now it had been offered the role of partner to the most powerful legal authority in the known galaxy, to be the hand that guided the will of the ledger. Eva Rostova, the historian, was being offered the position of magistrate. Anjali Eva said, her mind reeling with the possibilities. How long would it take to integrate that interface with our systems? Years, Commander. Decades, maybe, the engineer replied, her voice buzzing with excitement. The technology it's like trying to connect a pocket calculator to a god. But we can start. We can learn. That was the key. They could learn. The ledger was a teacher, and they were its first students in millennia. Their mission had changed. It was no longer simply to observe the past. It was to learn from it and to help shape the future by its example. The balance of the universe had shifted just a little in this forgotten system. It had tilted away from chaos and towards order, away from entropy and towards justice. The past does not merely speak, it instructs. A new alert chimed, this one from the long-range comms officer. Commander, I'm picking up a new contact. Another ship just entered the system. It's a coalition cruiser. The CSS Vigilance. Eva's heart sank. The coalition. Reinforcements. But they would arrive to a scene they could not possibly understand. They would see a disarmed hegemony fleet and an active unknown power. Their protocols would demand caution, containment. They might see the ledger not as a guardian, but as a threat. How could she possibly explain what had happened here? How could she convey the sheer, breathtaking truth of the Argent Ledger to a military command structure that thought only in terms of threats and firepower? Kenji voiced her thoughts exactly. They're going to see a ghost ship of immense power holding 5 cruisers hostage. Their first instinct will be to open fire. The arrival of help had just become their next great crisis. The hail came precisely 3 seconds later, its tone crisp and military. Unidentified vessel and escort. This is Captain Valeroff of the coalition ship Vigilance. You are approaching a restricted research area. Identify yourselves and state your intentions. The voice was firm, professional, and backed by the silent promise of torpedo tubes and railgun batteries. The Vigilance was a Bulwark-class cruiser, a vessel designed to end arguments, not start them. It saw a small science ship, a fleet of known predatory salvagers, and a colossal unknown radiating power levels that defied physics. Its conclusion was foregone. He sees us as the hostage-takers, or at least their collaborators, Kenji stated, his hands already moving across his tactical console, mapping the Vigilance's weapon arcs. Standard coalition doctrine for this scenario: neutralize the primary unknown threat first. That's the ledger. Then secure the known hostiles. They will fire on it, Commander. Eva's mind raced. How do you tell a soldier not to shoot at the thing that looks like a god-tier weapon? How do you explain a concept like a cosmic accountant to a man whose entire career is based on quantifiable threat assessment. You don't explain. You show. You teach. Lyceum, open a channel to the vigilance, Eva ordered. And prepare to do something unconventional. I want you to access the Ledger's index. Find the complete service record and crew manifest for the CSS Vigilance. The AI paused. Commander, that information should not exist in the Ledger's archive. It is a modern vessel. The Ledger records all energy expenditure in the system. Eva countered her logic, following a desperate, intuitive leap. That includes the quantum signatures of every person who just arrived. It sees their history, their records, their identity. See if it recorded them as they entered. Ask it. A wise teacher knows the student before giving the lesson. The channel chirped open. Captain Valarov, this is Commander Rostova of the Stellograph. The situation here is complex, but we are not in any danger. I need you to hold your position and not take any hostile action. Commander, my sensors show 5 hegemony cruisers with their weapons disabled and an artifact of unknown origin that is emitting enough energy to power a star system, Valerov's voice replied, tight with suspicion. Define complex. Before Eva could answer, Lyceum spoke, its synthesized voice cutting through the tension. Captain Valerov, the entity you are targeting is a non-combatant archival and legal vessel. To verify this, please confirm your service number, Coalition Fleet Registry 771 Alpha. A stunned silence emanated from the vigilance. That number was not part of a public record. It was a deep file identifier. Lyceum continued, its voice calm and level. Your tactical officer is Lieutenant Commander Priya Singh, whose daughter celebrated her 5th birthday 2 days ago. Your chief engineer, Commander Jax, is 3 weeks from retirement. The Argent Ledger logged your arrival, your identities, and your intent. Your intent is protective. It is not a threat. Therefore, you are not considered a debtor. The voice of the universe should be one of perfect knowledge. On the bridge of the Vigilance, Captain Valarov stared at his comms officer, who simply shook his head, his face pale. They hadn't transmitted any of that data. It was impossible. He was a man of steel and strategy, but a cold sliver of dread, or perhaps awe, slid down his spine. The unknown vessel knew them. It knew them intimately. Stellograph Valerov's voice came back, all the military bluster gone, replaced by a wary, unnerved caution. What is that thing? It's our history, Captain Eva replied softly. And it's a judge. The hegemony fleet you see is not our captive. They are serving a sentence. She proceeded to explain in the clearest and most concise terms she could manage the events of the last hour. She told him of the claim, the test, the judgment, and the sentence of restorative labor. She sent him the data logs, the record of the hegemony's hostile intent, and the text of her own judgment. As the data streamed between the ships, Eva felt a profound shift in her own role. She was no longer a commander or a scientist. She was a translator, a bridge between 2 entirely different conceptions of the universe, one of law and consequence, and one of shields and firepower. Her job was to ensure they did not annihilate each other through misunderstanding. A ledger is only as good as its interpretation. In the Stellograph's engineering bay, Anjali stared at the first few lines of the stewardship interface schematics displayed on her console. Her team was crowded around her, their expressions a mixture of confusion and wonder. The diagrams were less like engineering blueprints and more like cosmic mandala circuits that seemed to fold in on themselves through dimensions she couldn't comprehend. The power conduits weren't shielded wires. They were described as pathways of intent. The processors were labeled logic choirs. It's not a machine, she whispered to her assistant. It's a thought given a physical form. We can't build this. We have to learn to understand it. The work ahead of them was not one of fabrication. It was one of philosophy. It was a tangible cost, a drain on their resources and their sanity, to even begin to comprehend what the ledger was offering. Captain Valeroff took 15 minutes to review the data. 15 minutes of tense silence where the Vigilance floated motionless, its weapon ports still open, but no longer glowing with imminent fire. Eva waited. She knew this was the most important negotiation of her life. The fate of this entire new paradigm rested on the decision of one good, cautious soldier. Finally, the hail came again. Commander Rostova Valerov said, his voice heavy with the weight of the impossible. I have reviewed your logs. I do not understand what I am seeing, but the evidence is undeniable. The hegemony ships are powering up their engines, but not their weapons. Their trajectories match the archaeological sites you indicated. He paused. I am standing down my tactical alert, but I am not leaving. I will escort your courtroom until I have direct orders from Coalition Command. Relief washed over Eva so intensely she felt her knees weaken. He had listened. He had seen the truth, even if he didn't understand it. Thank you, Captain. We welcome the escort. The first precedent had been set. Wisdom had prevailed over protocol. For 3 days, a strange and silent convoy traveled the void. The magnificent Argent Ledger floated at the center, a silent, glowing testament to a forgotten age. Flanking it was the tiny science vessel Stellograph, its crew working feverishly to comprehend the gift they had been given. Behind them, the 5 hegemony cruisers followed their new orders, with a sullen, resentful obedience, their salvage claws now being retrofitted for delicate archaeological work. And watching over them all was the Coalition cruiser Vigilance, a skeptical but compliant guardian, its captain filing reports that were likely causing aneurysms back at Fleet Command. The dynamic was stable but fragile. Eva knew that the moment they re-established contact with the wider Coalition bureaucracy, and fear would descend. A committee would be formed. Admirals would demand the ledger be treated as a weapon. Politicians would try to claim it. She needed more than just one captain's report to prove its nature. She needed another case, another precedent. The universe, it seemed, was happy to provide. A distress call rippled through the system relayed from a nearby nebula. It was faint, ragged, and desperate. This is Oakhaven Colony. To any ship in range. We are under attack. The Obsidian Combine is... They are cracking the moon. Our habitat is failing. The message devolved into static and screams. Oakhaven was a small, independent colony on a tidally locked planet, its primary habitat built into the geologically stable moon that orbited it. The Obsidian Combine was a ruthless mining corporation known for acquiring claims through intimidation and then strip mining systems with a monstrous efficiency that bordered on planetary destruction. A true mirror reflects all light, even the dimmest. Kenji brought up the system data on the main screen. Oakhaven, independent settlement, rich in heavy metals. The Combine has been trying to force them out for years. Looks like they finally gave up on paperwork. The tactical display showed a massive corporate mining platform. The indomitable Yield, flanked by 2 smaller escort frigates firing enormous thermal lances into the moon's crust. The fractures were spreading towards the colony's location. Captain Valeroff is hailing us, the comms officer announced. Put him on, Eva said. Valeroff's face appeared on the screen, grim and resolute. Commander, I have the same distress call. That is a civilian colony under illegal assault. My orders are clear. I am moving to intervene. And you will be destroyed, Captain Lyceum stated flatly. The Combine's platform is a fortress. It outguns your cruiser by a factor of 3. Our probability models show your destruction is 99.8% certain. Valerov's jaw tightened. It is my duty to try. No, Eva said, stepping forward. Your duty is to save them, and you are not the only ship here with a sense of duty. She looked at the ledger, which seemed to hum with a new intensity, as if it too had heard the cry for help. It was time to move from theory to practice. It was time for the student to attempt her first lesson. A teacher's greatest hope is to see the lesson used. Lyceum, open a channel to the Argent Ledger, she commanded. Tell it we have a new entry for its consideration. A crime in progress. The account is open. The voice resonated in their minds, clear and immediate. Present the case. Eva took a deep breath. She wasn't just a commander anymore. She was an advocate pleading a case before the highest court she could imagine. A corporation, the Obsidian Combine, is knowingly destroying a civilian habitat for material gain. They are causing immense harm for profit. Their energy expenditure is an assault. She had Lyceum transmit the distress call, the tactical data, the Combine's history of predatory expansion. All of it. The evidence. There was a moment of silence. The light from the ledger seemed to sharpen its silver glow, taking on a harder diamond-like edge. Then it began to move. Not with the slow, majestic drift it had used before, but with a smooth, deliberate acceleration that defied all known principles of propulsion. It did not burn fuel. It simply went. The law does not wait for convenience. It moves toward injustice. The Vigilance, the Stellograph, and even the Hegemony fleet were left behind as the ancient vessel crossed the system with impossible speed. Eva and her crew could only watch on their screens, their hearts in their throats. They had just pointed a god at a problem and had no idea what it would do. When the Argent Ledger arrived at Oakhaven, it was a vision of profound contrast. The brutal, ugly machinery of the indomitable Yield was tearing apart a world, its lances gouging fiery wounds in the moon's surface. The ledger was a thing of serene, perfect geometry, a sliver of impossible white against the chaos. It did not power weapons. It simply placed itself between the mining platform and its victim, a shield of principle. The Combine Commander. A notoriously vicious man named Kalen reacted with predictable fury. What in the hell is that? I don't care. It's in my way. Blow it out of the sky. The platform and its frigates unleashed a torrent of fire. Plasma cannons, railguns, concussion missiles, a storm of destructive energy that would have vaporized a fleet of cruisers. The onslaught slammed into the Argent Ledger and vanished. The energy did not impact. It was not blocked by a shield. It was absorbed. The white hull of the ancient ship glowed brighter, the billions of sigils across its surface swirling like a captured galaxy. It drank the attack, its light growing from silver to a blinding, incandescent platinum. A debt has been incurred. The voice of the ledger announced not just to the Combine ships, but to everyone everywhere. It was a broadcast on all frequencies, a public declaration. The energy expended in violence has been recorded. Payment is now due. The accumulated energy of the attack was not fired back. The ledger did not believe in an eye for an eye. It believed in balance. A beam of pure white light, impossibly dense and focused, shot from the ledger. It did not strike the Combine ships. It struck the massive fractured asteroid field that the Combine's mining operation had created, the useless rock and debris they had discarded in their rapacious quest for the valuable ores. The beam touched each piece of debris, and a strange transformation began. The rock began to glow, to reshape itself. The laws of thermodynamics were being calmly and deliberately rewritten. The useless slag was being reforged, its molecular structure resequenced. Before the horrified eyes of the Combine crew, the asteroid field was being transformed into vast, intricate structures. Solar collectors, atmospheric processors, hydroponic farms, the very tools needed to build a new thriving colony. The cost of destruction can be repurposed for creation. The Ledger was not destroying the Combine. It was using their own violent energy to build a better future for their victims. It was taking the debt and investing it. The Oakhaven colonists, watching from their failing habitat, saw a miracle bloom in their sky. A fleet of new advanced orbital structures paid for by the very energy meant to destroy them was being constructed out of the rubble of their own system. Kalen screamed at his crew to fire again, but their weapons were dead. Just as with the hegemony, their own systems refused the command. The Ledger had tallied the debt, collected the payment, and closed the account. The Combine platform and its frigates were left with just enough power for life support, their vast energy reserves now converted into a new home for the people they had tried to kill. The account is balanced. The voice stated its work done. Aboard the Vigilance, Captain Valarov stood on his bridge, his mouth agape. He had been prepared to die fighting a monster. Instead, he had just witnessed an act of cosmic creative justice so profound it shattered his understanding of the universe. He looked at the readings. The Combine was neutralized. The colonists were saved. Not a single life had been lost. It was a perfect victory achieved without a single casualty. He turned to his comms officer. "Get me Commander Rostova," he said. His voice filled with a reverence that bordered on religious awe. "And get me a priority channel to Fleet Command. Tell them I am officially requesting the establishment of a new legal doctrine. We're calling it the Argent Ledger Doctrine." The precedent was now locked. It was durable. It was visible. And it had just saved 1,000 lives. In the weeks that followed, the story of Oakhaven and the Argent Ledger spread like wildfire. The coalition, faced with the undeniable evidence from Captain Valarov's report and the live recordings of the incident, had no choice but to accept the impossible truth. The hegemony, now under strict coalition supervision, continued their archaeological penance with a newfound grudging respect. The Obsidian Combine was legally dismantled, its assets seized, to further fund the restoration of the Oakhaven colony. The universe felt for the first time in centuries like it was bending toward justice. The stellograph remained at the Ledger's side, its new role as steward vessel made official. Eva Rostova was no longer just a commander. She was the chief arbiter, the human interpreter for a power that was reshaping galactic law. The work was endless. Requests for adjudication poured in from across the settled worlds, disputes over territory, over resources, over historical grievances. Each one was a new test, a new opportunity to find a solution of balance rather than bloodshed. The stewardship interface in her engineering bay was slowly, painstakingly being integrated, a bridge of understanding, being built one line of impossible code at a time. The cost was high. Her crew was exhausted, their ship pushed to its limits, but the victory was a renewed sense of hope for humanity. Eva stood on her bridge looking at the glowing white form of the Ledger. It was no longer just an artifact. It was a partner. It was a promise that humanity's greatest creation was not a weapon to end wars, but an idea to prevent them. It was a testament to the belief that the arc of history was long, but it bent toward justice, especially when it had a guide this powerful. The Ledger remembered every debt, and it would always ensure the books were balanced. Its judgment was as old as the stars, but its work was just beginning. A new holographic sigil blinked into existence in the air beside her command chair, a soft silver light from the newly operational interface. It was a request for a new entry, a new case awaiting her review. Its law was as endless as the void,